Hey everyone, welcome to Altcoin, Bitcoin, Crypto, ABCs to Wealth. I want to take a moment today to say Happy New Year to each and every one of you out there listening who've tuned in. Thank you for tuning in. Hit the like and the subscribe button if you like what you're hearing, and let's move on to the first headline of the day. This comes from Yahoo Finance, and it states a catastrophic market crash could come in 2020 if this indicator turns surprisingly south. It says the U.S. jobs market has to stay solid in 2020, or it could be look out below for the red hot stock market. U.S. equities are slightly overpriced, you think? But there is still reason to be long, CME floor trader Bob Iacino told Yahoo Finance. But if you see any sort of employment weakness in January and February, it could be a catastrophic crash for the equities market. Uh, it could be, it might not be. I don't know. I don't think so. But one of the next things that we want to hit on here is this here, which is really interesting. Out of the USA Today, it states it's really over. Corporate pensions head for extinction as the nature of retirement plans changes. And it's interesting that they would be touching on this at the end of the year. Of course, you know, everybody with the traditional financial people who give you your information and give you your game plan for the next year. They always talking about pensions and retirement and your accounts and planning ahead and everything, which I agree with. But you know, not all their planning is with your best interest in mind. It's with their best interest. You know, the things that they tell you are assets. You've got to ask the question, well, who are they an asset for, me or you? You know, like when your mortgage broker tells you, oh, yeah, well, your house is an asset. You need to think, well, is it an asset for you or for me? It's an asset for you because you're getting my money off of that sale and off of my monthly mortgage payment. Anyway, off of that rant here, it says it's really over. Corporate pensions head for extinction as the nature of retirement plans changes. The practice of companies sending monthly retirement checks to their former workers is headed for extinction, and remaining pension plans are in a tough financial shape. Despite gains in the stock market this year, U.S. pension plans are near their worst financial state in 2 years, according to the new report by Mercer, which casts a spotlight on the escalating cost of past promises to employees. Most U.S. companies no longer offer defined pension benefits, which typically provided guaranteed monthly payments to workers when they retired, but pension funds that still operate must gain in value to ensure that they have enough to meet their obligations. By late 2019, the average pension fund had 85% of the funds necessary to meet its obligation over time, due largely to low interest rates, according to Mercer's 2020 Defined Benefit Outlook. Basically, what they're saying is by late 2019, the average pension fund was 15% short of the funds they needed to meet their obligations because of the low interest rates. And where are the low interest rates coming from? Those low interest rates are coming from the banks, which basically dictate and govern the market and generally say, you know, we're raising interest rates so you guys can make more, or we're lowering interest rates so you're not going to make as much this time. Well, as you know, the Fed has been lowering the interest rate, and they've lowered the interest rate to just about zero. And a lot of the countries around the world are at zero or negative interest rate, which basically means that in order for you to put money into a bank, you've got to pay them to put your money in the bank and let it sit there without collecting interest. Just so, like, just as a for instance, you put $100 in a savings account and you hold on to that for a year in a savings account, and at the end of the year you want that $100 back. Well, if they're charging you negative interest, say 10%, then you're only getting 90 out of that $100 back, and you're giving them 10%, $10 in order for you to be able to get that $90 out of your account. And that's basically the way things are going. Here's an interesting thing right here too. It says General Electric announced in October that it would offer lump sum pensions buyouts to about 100,000 former U.S. employees who have not yet begun receiving their pensions. Why? Well, because The company, which has been facing pressure to bolster its finances, also announced plans to freeze pension benefits for about 20,700 salaried pensioners at the current levels. Basically, again, going back up to the earlier part of the article, because of low interest rates, they're not making the returns on the funds that they had put into these accounts. And because they're not making that, everything that they promised their employees that they would do, they can't do. Therefore, they're making changes. We've got this next one comes up here, which was a tweet from Twitter from Honda at XRP Mate. It's interesting here. It says the Federal Reserve, businesses and financial institutions may face liquidity challenges with trillions of dollars of capital funds in pre-funded transactional accounts, known as nostro-vostro accounts, used to facilitate cross-border payments. And the article basically says that as domestic payments continue to experience rapid innovation in speed, security, and access, users are looking for better, quicker ways to do it. And the old way of doing things, business and financing, the old way of doing it through nostro-vostro accounts isn't going to cut it anymore because of the very fact that liquidity is tied up in those nostro and vostro accounts. And with that liquidity being tied up, there is a lack of free-flowing funds to be able to meet the obligations that come out into the market. That is one of the things that's going on right now that's creating issues with the market. With the liquidity in the market, there is no liquidity basically because the governments have printed so much money without any backing that there are so many obligations and so many things out there that need to be paid out. There's not enough money in the system to be able to meet these obligations and to pay everybody. So if everybody can't at the same time was to go into the system and say, okay, I want my money now, there's not enough money. It's all tied up, and there is nothing there really because it's all printed out of thin air with nothing to back it. So if you were to go to the bank with every other person on the earth at the same time, there wouldn't be enough money for everybody to be able to get their money out so that they would be able to have it in hand. Here's something interesting from Spyro at O_rips. Banks celebrate record high stocks with most layoffs since 2015. This came out on December 28th. Notice that they're showing you the banks celebrating the record high stocks with the most layoffs. Deutsche Bank had 18,000 layoffs, Unicredit 8,000 layoffs, Santander 5,400, Commerce Bank 4.3 thousand, HBSI, HSBC, and it goes down the line there. The stocks are hitting a record high around the globe. And then more than 50 banks have announced plans to cut a combined 77,780 jobs. That is interesting. Here's another interesting thing that I came across in the Yahoo Business section the other day. It states Wells Fargo has a new CEO, and it's stating that change is afoot inside of Wells Fargo and Company. Charles Schaff arrived as the bank's new chief executive officer in October. He's held a marathon of meetings with executives, grilling them about the way that they do business. On busy days, a lineup of presenters has come and gone, some flummoxed by pointed questions or uncertain whether he was satisfied with their answers, because he got a poker face. And you know what? It's good, because now you're keeping your employees on their toes wondering what is going on. Now, Scharf, who is 54, his past work was J.P. Morgan Chase & Company, Visa, and the Bank of New York Mellon Corporation. And it says such moves could say a lot about his strategy, including how he will address the need to overhaul technology and improve earnings after bogus sales forced the company to ease off a long-standing system of incentives. Interesting. The company has had a long-standing system of incentives based off of people just being there and looking from the outside, from the media, like they're doing their job, and just with all the rest of the banks in the industry, they're all, bolstering everything, making things look good for the stock market, making things look good for the customers, for their dividend holders, and people expecting a return on dividend return, and for the general public in the media as well. But Scharf came in and he said, okay, now let's find out, why are you doing what you're doing, and what have you done, and why have you done it? Give me a good reason why you did what you did. And that's all because of the bogus sales that forced the company to ease off their long-standing system of incentives. Basically, what it comes down to is Wells Fargo, along with all the rest of the banks, they just got caught in this in particular instance. They all got were screwing over their customers, and they were making the money. But you know what? You play, you pay, and every dog has his day. And eventually, that you go to that well one too many times, and you hit that last drop of water, and there's nothing else to draw from in that well. Well, the banks around the world, the central banks, the local banks, the country banks, the mom and pop banks, they're all facing the same liquidity problem and the same issue with having made themselves look so good before the public and in the media, and now all the chickens are coming home to roost. Here's an interesting thing. UN chief appoints special envoy on climate action and finance. On December 1st, in the United Nations, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has appointed Mark Carney as his special envoy on climate action and finance, Guterres said on Sunday. Carney is currently the governor of the Bank of England, which we've gone over here, and many other people in the cryptocurrency space and the XRP community have spoken about Mark Carney and the Bank of England. He will become a member of the UN staff at the point at which he ceases to work with the British Central Bank. His term of office at the Bank of England officially ends January 31st. Prior to his current position, Carney served as chief of the Financial Stability Board from 2011 to 2018 and governor of the Bank of Canada from 2008 to 2013. He began his career at Goldman Sachs before joining the Canadian Department of Finance. Quite interesting. As a special envoy, Carney will focus on the ambitious implementation of climate action with special attention to significantly shifting public and private financial markets and mobilizing private finance to the levels needed to achieve the goal of the Paris Agreement to limit global temperatures rise to below 1.5 degrees Celsius, as the article went on to state. Here's another article dealing with the same thing, but they point out a different thing. It says, Mr. Carney said that the UN Climate Change Conference provides a platform to bring the risk from climate change and the opportunities from the transition to a net zero economy into the heart of financial decision making. Listen to that. The opportunity from the transition to a net zero economy. That's important. Because if you think about it, when you're talking about digital assets, cryptocurrency and all, and you're talking about, the granddaddy of them all, Bitcoin, and other projects out there that are similar to Bitcoin, and then you get to other projects such as XRP, I'm going to show you a chart in a second here that's quite interesting. To do so, the disclosure of climate risk must become comprehensive. Climate risk management must be transformed, and investing for a net zero world must go mainstream. Now, these are Mark Carney's words. To do so, to provide the platform to bring the risk from climate change and the opportunities from the transition to a net zero economy into the heart of the financial decision making, they have to transform. The investing for a net zero must go mainstream. Basically, what it's saying here is this, that this is a thread from Twitter from Jan B at Bloomer23. He says sustainable environmental loans and insurances to the unbanked will be set in place, rewarding banks that follow low carbon protocols and TCFD. Low carbon protocols. The whole thing for a long time has been global warming and stopping global warming, and what can we do to decrease global warming and to save the earth. Well, when Mark Carney takes over this, one of the things he's going to be doing is looking for sustainable environmental loans and insurances to the unbanked. and setting those in place. And then he's going to look to reward banks that follow low carbon protocols. Well, banks that use a certain digital asset are going to be able to meet that low carbon protocol, as opposed to banks that are going to end up using Bitcoin. And here is the reason. Here is the reason why. John Wick stated on Twitter the other day, on the 31st, "I bet you any money Mark Carney loves these kinds of data, these stats, when he hits his new job in February. XRP consumes less energy than Ethereum and Bitcoin." You see Bitcoin on the right here. It takes 68.81 terawatts of power to create Bitcoin in the mining process. It takes 19.62 terawatts to create Ethereum in mining. And it takes 0.01 terawatts to create XRP, to use XRP actually. And there is no mining to XRP. That's why it doesn't create anything. It doesn't take all those terawatts to be able, because XRP has already been created by the creators 7 years ago when they put this into operation. They had already created all the XRP that are ever going to exist. And although we know that there is supposed to be limited Ethereum and limited Bitcoin in the market, they've still got to mine that to be able to bring that out. And it's taking 68.81 terawatts to create one Bitcoin and 19.62 terawatts to create one Ethereum. So that's pretty interesting. Then we go to a article here from Yahoo Finance as well. It says banks and tech will finally get married in the 2020s. Wells Fargo, Mike Mayo. 2020 will be the year big banks and tech will get married. Bank stocks are capping off their best year since 2009. Veteran bank analyst Mike Mayo thinks the next decade will be ever better thanks to the coming banking fully embracing technology. You think? "I think this will be the golden age of banks and technology," said Mayo, who heads the U.S. large cap bank research at Wells Fargo Securities. "We see banks finally getting married to technology. If you look back over the decade, they've dated, they've broken up, they went their own ways with risky behavior, they reconciled, and now we think they're engaged to have a more permanent relationship." Mayo writes in his latest note that banks don't have much of a choice. That's true. Because of the money that they've pumped into tech, banks spend more on tech than any other industry. Well, they spend more on than any other industry because banking is a technical thing, and tech is taking over the banking industry in quite a way. But they don't have much of a choice, because if you don't go to digital assets and use them, then you are basically cutting off your nose to spite your face, and you're basically going to end up so far behind that you're not going to be in the game anymore. Next one is a tweet from XRPL at XRP Lite from the December 31st. It says, "This confirms level playing field. Ripple freeing up trillions of dollars in Nostra Vostra accounts. It will enable them to mobilize a lot more private capital. It is all confirmed. Please wake up." For those of you who are not on board with XRP, I encourage you to take a look at the company Ripple, take a look at XRP, take a look at the platform, take a look at the tech behind it, take a look at the team behind it, take a look at what they've been doing for the last 7 years. They are the only digital asset cryptocurrency company in the space that I'm aware of. Now, I may have missed one or two, but I don't know. There's over 3,000 companies in the space right now, but if you go to the top 25, you'll find out that Ripple is the only company in the top 25 at least, and I suspect further down the list, that has been working with regulators and governments and the IMF and central banks around the world and regulators to make sure that they are complying with all the regulations that are going to be required, not only in one country but all countries around the world, because they are looking to. They started with their laser focus of creating a system to bring smooth transition to cross-border payments. And then once they got that done and that was up and running and flowing and moving, then they would move on to other things that they had on the list of things to do. But they have worked and are working for cross-border payments and now for all the other things that go on in the banking industry to bring such ease and freedom of the flow of money around the world, just like emails go around the world. Their goal is to free up money to flow as easily as data flows through an email. And they're doing it. Now, this is a tweet from the IMF, which is quite interesting, and this was done a tweet that I saw on December 31st as well. And this states digital currencies in 2020, find out what central banks are doing. And the IMF has an article here that lets you know what we're doing with digital assets and digital currencies in 2020, find out what the central banks are doing. So there's an article for you to take a look at and to end up contemplating and reading and seeing what you get out of it. See, do your homework. I'm always telling you guys, do your homework. I'm not a financial advisor. I am not a professional trader. I'm not a professional cryptocurrency guy. I'm not a professional digital asset investor. I'm just a guy out here putting my voice out into the mix of things and giving you another option to look at, to listen to, another flow of thought on digital assets, cryptocurrency, XRP, the community itself at large, and something else for you to think about. So hit the like, hit the subscribe, leave a comment down below if you care to, and we will see you on the next one. Again, Happy New Year, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care.